This is Lloyd Cole. You're listening to the Nothing Shocking podcast.
Want to know what's going on in the world of music? Then tune in to the Nothing Shocking podcast, a non-genre based, all ages friendly rock and roll program. Join us weekly for interviews with all your favorite rock stars from the mainstream to the underground. You can find us at nothingshocking.libsyn.com or anywhere you download podcasts.
We're putting the band back together.
The numbers all go to 11.
I'm talking about bands that rock. Led Zeppelin. What about Sabbath? AC/DC. Motorhead.
Does that mean it's louder? Is it any louder?
Well, it's one louder, isn't it?
We're not worthy! We're not worthy!
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.
I get up off the ground and raise my head. Days like this, think I should be dead. One for Satan, two for me. Let's cheat the devil, it's fun, don't you agree?
Welcome to the Nothing Shocking podcast. I'm your co-host, Jeff Untied, and with me in Dog Bowl Studios is
Coach Nez.
You can find the Nothing Shocking podcast on Libsyn or any podcatchers. Like our Facebook page or follow us on Twitter at No Shock Pod.
You can also find the Nothing Shocking podcast on Rock Rage Radio every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. Central Time. Our sponsor is Ragged Records, located in downtown Rock Island, Illinois, and downtown Davenport, Iowa. We'd like to thank the Hong Kong Sleepover for allowing us to use their music for our intro and bumper ending. Tonight's guest is
Lloyd Cole.
Yes, promoting his 12th solo album, On Pain.
And he's got some upcoming live dates in October in the UK.
Yeah, fantastic interview. Let's get to it.
All right, good night.
Good night. Lloyd, welcome to the Nothing Shocking podcast. I'd like to introduce you, my co-host, Jeff Untied.
Lloyd, thanks for joining us tonight.
Hi, guys.
We are so excited to have you. Thank you for your willingness to participate. This past June, you released your 12th solo album, On Pain. It was produced by Chris Hughes. Can you talk a little bit more about the writing and recording process of this new album?
Sure. I guess it started in earnest when we got locked down in March of 2020. I was on stage in Hamburg, and then we drove to Gothenburg, and then that was that. We got shut down, and I came back, and I just thought, oh, well, I might as well start working on this project. I already had an idea after the previous album, Guesswork, that I wanted to start from a similar position, but go to greater extremes. And the idea of the extremes were to make the complex and the dense more so, and to make the simple and the minimal more so. So that was the basic starting point for the record. I decamped up here where I am now in my attic studio, and I started fooling around with sounds. And a lot of the record came from sounds and timbres rather than chord progressions in terms of the starting positions. For example, I think the first thing I wrote for the record was the Wolves song. And that came from me playing around with a modular synthesizer and then trying out this new sampling application that I had on the iPad. And I found something that I thought sounded really lovely and musical. I didn't really know what it was, though. So I imported it into Logic and found out that you could play in the key of F along with it, and it had a tempo of approximately 80 BPM, and I started building the song around it like that. 4 of the tracks were delivered to me by Blair Cowan and Neil Clark, my original 2 co-founders of the Commotions.
Yes.
And those tracks were delivered not complete, but they were freestanding, so to speak. They existed as pieces of music on their own, and I used a great deal of their recording, but I had to do some chopping and changing to make the pieces into something I could sing over. So, like a lot of the record came out of sound and chopping things up rather than sitting at the guitar or the piano.
Oh, very cool. We've talked to many artists during the COVID lockdown that found that the lockdown gave them like a renaissance in their writing and recording. For you, did you find a writing renaissance in your songwriting during the COVID lockdown?
Rather more of the opposite. Once I established that the material I was working on was something that could become an album, it occurred to me that there was no sign of the end of the lockdown, and I had no way of generating income for I didn't know how long. And I had no safety net and no fallback position. So I quickly lost impetus when it came to making the record, and I started becoming more of a cottage industry. I started telling handwritten lyrics, which I felt incredibly stupid. I'd never done before. Once I started doing it, because a lot of people wanted them and were willing to pay quite a lot of money for them. And then I started the Patreon page, which has become a sort of real time memoir / museum.
Very good. You made a kind of an interesting point when you said selling songs. Yeah. We have come by through a lot of artists that they kind of get out of the recording part of things, but they get into the full selling their songs to other artists. Is that something that has inspired you to do maybe somewhere down the line in the future, or would you like to keep the songs for yourself for the most part?
I would love for other people to record my songs more often. It happens once in a while, but not very often. But the few times that I've tried to write for other people, I find that my voice is maybe a little too strong in terms of it. People don't necessarily want to sing a Lloyd Cole song. They want to sing a song of theirs. Maybe at this stage in my life I might be better at it, but I'm actually just so darn busy doing everything else that I really don't have. I'm stretched pretty thin when it comes to a record coming out and getting ready for a tour. I'm involved with everything. We're making a video for The Idiot today, and the video is going to be shot in Toronto, but I'll be on the phone a lot.
Oh, very cool. As you spoke of The Idiot, that's my favorite track on Pain. Can you talk a little bit more about I guess maybe the creative side of things for that song? It just seemed like that song, when I listened to the album, it sticks out for me, from my ear.
Sure. Let's see. Blair delivered the tune. I think his working title for it was And So We Beat On. So my initial demos were called And So We Beat On. Mm-hmm. And then I had this sketch of an idea of a sort of Escape from LA scenario where two characters who may or may not be Bowie and Iggy sort of rescue each other from what seemed like it would be potentially an inevitable death, I think, to be honest. Both of them were living so dangerously, I think, that they wouldn't have survived if they'd stayed in LA. I've been kind of obsessing on this, well, I guess people call it Berlin trilogy, whatever you want to call it, the Bowie Iggy period, 76 to 77, where Bowie went to France and then to Berlin and made 4 albums in a year. I think it's like one of the peaks of artistry of the 20th century. The quality of the material over such a short period of time is mind-blowing. So I'm a bit of a fanboy, and I found this angle to have somebody that may or may not be Iggy being the narrator, and I sort of just ran with it, and I got pretty corny. I found that I could insert some songs from the period into the lyrics. But the thing that excited me most is I don't write that many songs which are sweet and warm. And the idea of two friends saving each other. I thought it was quite beautiful and sweet. And when I get a chance to write something like that, I'm going to grab it because those chances are few and far between.
Oh, it's a fantastic song.
Yeah. I think my favorite song is Warm by the Fire. It kind of had a Bob Dylan-esque feel to me. I know you've mentioned many times over the years that you're a fan of Bob Dylan and influence on you, but can you maybe give our listeners a little bit? Was there a Bob Dylan influence in that song?
I wasn't aware of there being one, but I've been at it for so long that I've assimilated stuff from heroes or workmates. I mean, when I became a solo artist, I had no idea if I was going to be able to make records on my own. I'm not being falsely modest or anything. I just didn't want to be in a band anymore. I had this really amazing couple of months, the first couple of months in New York, when I started making demos and go, oh, I can program drums. I didn't know. Oh, I can arrange strings. I didn't know. And so, when you study your heroes for so long, boy, I hope we assimilate some of their strengths without trying to out and out imitate them. I mean, there's a great Picasso quote about, just copy your heroes, because if you've got a voice of your own, your voice will still be stronger, so your work won't look like theirs. And I'm sort of at that point these days where I think my voice is strong enough that I don't need to worry about that side of thing. It's funny, but when my son heard that song when it was finished, he actually said it sounds like something Bowie would have done. So, but it's playing around with words quite a lot, and there's a reversal of perspective in the third verse, and I suppose that third verse was the key for me in terms of feeling it was worth pursuing as a project. This song was a really, really lot of work. It started out as a loop in Ableton Live sometime in the mid 2000s. I can't remember when. Cool. And it was just this kind of little looping chordal loop thing that I just liked the sound of. I didn't know what it was. It was just something I found or stumbled upon working. And I just kept going back to it every couple of years, thinking, I've got to do something with this sometime. I've got to do something with this. And in lockdown, I thought, you know what, I'm going to try and do something with this little thing. So I got the Ableton Live loop out, and I figured out sort of what the chords were. And I tried to play along with it, but it was slightly out of tune. So I was like, okay, I'll just recreate something that sounds a bit like it. The finished product sounds nothing like it, but that was the starting position. And that was the reason that the chord progression in the verse is G, B minor, D, E minor, which is incredibly banal chord progression, which if I'd been working on guitar, no way would I have written that, because it's a dull chord progression. It's only made to work because of the way the instrumentation works within it. And it's almost not a chord progression. It's almost nothing. It's kind of more of just a riff, which moves through different variations, staying in the same key. It was very much a music concrete type song. There was a lot of cutting stuff up, and there was a lot of me giving up on the song. I kept thinking, no, it's just not working. Chris Hughes just kept saying, yes, it's working. Yes, it's working. You must keep working on it. I remember sending him a lyric one night, or first vocal sketch, and I listened to it the following morning, and I emailed him back, said, ignore that last message. It's rubbish. It's rubbish. And he said, no, it's not rubbish. That's the one. And I went back to him and, okay, I'll work some more on this. But really the song, for it to be worthwhile in terms of standing on its own as a song, it needed more than what was going on in the first half, because everybody's got a song about rioting and cars burning. So it was only when I kind of stumbled on this idea that maybe the narrator isn't actually talking about something that's happening. Maybe he's talking about something that he's writing, or maybe he's talking about a script that he's reading, or maybe he's in a video game. Then it became an exciting idea to me, and then I finally got some traction and was able to get it finished.
Oh, so cool.
Yeah.
Well, as a veteran artist as yourself, with 12 solo albums, and I guess maybe you could take COVID out of the equation on this, but can you talk a little bit more about the challenges in the now of writing and recording a new album opposed to, I guess, maybe earlier in your solo career?
I don't think that other than time and energy, it's that different. There have been periods in my life, periods in my so-called career, that there have been difficulties because I've been stalled. I've been sort of treading water, not really knowing what I want to do next. The mid-90s were probably the worst period for me because I think up until then, I just assumed that I'd have a great idea for every next album, just like Bowie did. And then in the mid-90s, I sort of hit a wall and went, well, maybe I'm not like Bowie. Maybe I'm more like Van Morrison, who just makes the same album over and over again. But since I've sort of retreated from mainstream music in the late 90s, early 2000s, I haven't started a project without having a very strong idea about what it was that I was doing, and then it's something that it's exciting to me. I've already got that idea for the next album. So that's the thing that I need. The rest is work. That I have no problem working.
Oh, very good.
Well, yeah, thanks for sharing the story on Warm by the Fire, because that kind of inspires me with, we've talked to different artists where they talk about going back and taking a song that's older and reworking it and chopping it up. So that was really cool. Do you do that a lot for albums, or do you try to concentrate on writing new songs?
Well, there's always like a pool of ideas that you kind of feel like got away because you never quite got them finished into something that was up to the excitement that you had from maybe the initial idea. You thought, I could make something great out of this. So there's unfinished ideas, or there's ideas where you just couldn't think of a vocal line, or there's a vocal line you couldn't find chords or beat to go with it. So I mean, I must have a pool of, gosh, at least 100 of those.
Oh, that's awesome.
Most of them are, most of them probably belong to stylistic periods that it's unlikely I'll be able to use them again. But there are definitely a few. I mean, I've always, at the back of my notebook, I've always got a list of, songs that I've sort of haven't quite got into the point where you could say, oh, that's a song. It's just more of an idea for a song. So yeah, I'm always mixing brand new ideas with ideas that have been percolating for a long time. I mean, on this record, I Can Hear Everything. That is that piece of music was originally written in 1983 by Blair, and because of the ridiculous time signature in the song, I didn't think there was any way I could sing on it in those days. So I think I just entitled it "The Optimist," and we were just going to call it an instrumental. Yeah. And for some reason, Blair revisited it a few years ago. He said, I'm having another go at this. And I said, oh, it sounds great. And with the technology that we have these days, I was able to map out what his weird time signature was, and I was able to make a sort of like put it on graph paper within the DAW, and I had to create a series of 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, like little cue points, because there's no way I could sing it if I didn't have those cue points. It's it's not a time signature that comes remotely naturally to me, but I like the sound of it. So it was exciting to be able to finally make something work and actually get a bit of a reward for having this access to this technology, because a lot of the time we feel like the technology is driving us, and we really don't want that.
Absolutely. On Pain was released, and critics applauded it, and it's still being applauded as we speak. But you've been recording music for a long time. And for you yourself, you've stayed very consistent in the Lloyd Cole sound. I guess the question is how have you stayed loyal to your sound all these years later and never gave in to trends at all?
Well, we were very lucky when we first started in that we were sort of bucking the trend of the synth pop, which was very popular at the time, making a kind of jangly rock and roll pop music. Mm-hmm. We sort of stumbled upon that sound. It was just something that we as a band could do naturally. We sort of fell into it. I think when we were initially, my initial idea for the Commotions was probably going to be something that sounded more like the Style Council or Isaac Hayes, but we just weren't very good at it, and we wrote "Are You Ready to Be Heartbroken?" Well, I wrote it one afternoon when we needed a B-side to what was going to be our first independent single, and it took all of us, I think, about a week or two to realize that it was much better than anything we'd done before, and it was something that sounded not just like some band who want to sound like Isaac Hayes or the Style Council. And we sort of found a sound, and over that next year, I sort of found something, part of a voice for singing. I think it takes more than a year to really establish a voice, but once my voice was established, and a sort of aesthetic stamp had been put on the material, that aesthetic stamp isn't going to change that much unless I'm radically, unless my ideas about what is beautiful change as I get older. And I don't think my ideas of what is beautiful have changed that much. I still think that side 2 of Low is sublimely beautiful, but I still think Telegram Sound by T-Rex is fantastic. I haven't changed in that respect. All that's changed is I found a lot of other things which can also be beautiful that I didn't know about. And so I think really my aesthetic has not changed that much. My voice, very strangely, has been quite consistent since 1990 or so. My range is a little less now than it was then, but I haven't gone Tom Waits or anything, so I haven't had the necessity to adapt to a change like that. And yeah, I have a broader palette to work with just because I've lived longer and I have ambitions to make music beyond jangle pop.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah. I think I read somewhere that you had said that, the album is, nearing commercial death, but, you still enjoy making full albums.
I do, and I think with the vinyl resurgence, I'm hoping I was wrong. I mean, it seems like the idea of the vinyl of the album through vinyl is becoming something that young people are not dismissing anymore.
Right. Absolutely.
I mean, it's a shame it took vinyl to do it, because I'm absolutely not a vinyl enthusiast, and because I have an internet shop, shipping vinyl is just a nightmare. And it's really not green. It's really expensive. It requires massive amounts of packing. So I think my message to people is if you really love vinyl, please buy it from your local record shop.
Well said.
Songwriting. Can you kind of compare and contrast your songwriting style of the early years to your songwriting style in the now? Do you feel like your songwriting over the years has matured as you've gotten older, or do you just feel like it's kind of been status quo from the inception of your songwriting, I guess?
No, there've been quite a lot of changes. I think a lot of what we were doing in 1983 to 84 was, hey, look at us, look at me, look what I can do. It's almost like showing off with lyrics, and possibly got lucky that it doesn't, that there's more to it than that. And for the years 84 through 90, I suppose, I worked on just trying to be more concise, tried to be less wordy, because I'm naturally wordy. I don't need don't need to be encouraged to have more words. And the idea of being more direct was appealing. But I think by the time I got to 1990, 1991, I'd pretty much established my way of writing my songs. But I look back on that period, and I see a lot of songs that were quite lazily written. There's too many babes and babies, because they're just syllables that you need to add. I have a joke I tell on stage every now and again. It's like when I got finished making Love Story, which my record company were actually very happy with, having been very disappointed with the previous album, and having dinner with Dave Bates, who's the A&R man, and he says there's too many babes and babies in the lyrics on this record. And I said to him, you are the A&R man, and I am the songwriter, and that's the end of that. And he was right. So I see some laziness, which I'm embarrassed by, and I think it was probably only when I started studying Cohen's writing that I realized that attention to detail, that willingness to take 4 years to finish a song if necessary, to get it dead right, is something that I would rather be associated with rather than like a Shane MacGowan or a Dylan type songwriter. But they're both brilliant, but they're both quite lazy as well. So I mean, you can, it was, what's his name, Ginsberg. Allen Ginsberg said, I trust Dylan's heart. I trust his content, but I don't trust his rhyming, because he goes for some pretty easy rhymes here now and again. So I would say I feel like I'm obviously, my aesthetic hasn't changed that much, but my ability to edit myself, I think, is better, and it has gradually been better over the years. One of the things I've been doing with this Patreon page, the first idea I had for when somebody said, "Oh, you should do a Patreon page," I said, "Well, what would I do?" And then I thought, well, there's this one project that I've been wanting to do forever, which is to trace the genesis and development of my songs through the notebooks that I kept when I was writing the songs. And so I started doing that. I found the notebooks from Rattlesnakes, from Easy Pieces, from Mainstream, and I found the first references to, and I took photographs of all the pages and laid them down, sort of, this is how these songs were written, without very much comment. Just, this is how songs were written. And I find now that when you compare the notebooks from the 80s and 90s, once I get to the point where the song's about done, I stop. Now I get to the point where the song's about done generally more quickly, and then I keep writing it out over and over again. So there'd be pages and pages in the notebooks that are almost exactly the same, with just one or two syllables differently, until I get it exactly the way I want it.
Oh, fantastic.
Nice.
Jeff, you got the next one?
I think in October you got an upcoming UK tour. Can you talk a little bit more about your approach to playing live and touring these days?
Well, it's very, very different to when we first started. I mean, I think when we were going on stage in the 80s, I considered it to be more of a recital rather than a performance. But in the 2000s, needs must, I became a sort of troubadour and started playing solo concerts around the world, not playing with a band anymore. And I had to learn to sort of be a performer and to put on a show. And actually that has impacted the last few albums as well, because I felt like, even though my range isn't as wide as it used to be, and the low notes and the high notes are probably not, the difference between them is a little bit less than it used to be. Mm-hmm. I feel like when I'm on stage now, I'm more of a singer than a writer, and I tried to get that feeling with the recordings of Guesswork and this one. I don't sing into a big condenser microphone in the studio anymore. I just use a handheld one and pretend I'm on stage. Funny thing for an old man to be doing. But just to try and get more emotion, I suppose, into the presentation, or more something. Anyway, so that over the years I've been playing solo, acoustic, duo, sometimes going out with Neil. In the 2010s, I had a little baby bluegrass group called the Small Ensemble. And what working with these various arrangements of acoustic instruments enabled me to find out is that there's very few songs out there in the canon that can't be rearranged and played live. If you actually want to make it happen, you can find an arrangement. I always thought I could never play Forest Fire live. I thought that needs the guitar solo and the drums. And then one day I was sort of besieged on stage, and they wouldn't sort of stop shouting for it. So I said, okay, I'll try and play it. And it went incredibly well. And it's now one of the high points of the solo show when I do solo shows. So we're going to have as a 4-piece. We're not going to sound like pretty much any record I've ever made, because I've never really made a record with a 4-piece sound. So it was always either 2 guitars or kind of none. So it's Neil and Blair and myself and a drummer from Glasgow who's half Icelandic and half Scot, and we're going to find a sound. Obviously, we're all preparing and practicing in advance, but. No, we're not going to really try and sound exactly like any of the records, and I think as a consequence, it's going to be an experience which is just something that won't happen again. It's every tour is different from the one before, and this one's certainly going to be a challenge. I'm playing bass for the most part in the second set, and I've never done that before.
Cool.
Since high school anyway. It's going to be exciting. I mean, the idea of having less players means there's going to be more air between the different instruments, and it's a challenge. But also, I mean, I love the sound of, like, say, Pill, and that was the 3-piece basically. And I've never really had the courage or the conviction to make records that sound quite like that. But it's quite exciting to have a live show which will inevitably be somewhat minimalist.
Well, we're excited for you.
Yeah.
So when you look at your body of work as a whole, do you have a favorite album? And do you also have another album that you say, I wish I could redo that album all over again?
Well, I wish I hadn't made Bad Vibes. I think it's probably the only album. And I think it was not, we didn't have a clear idea what we were trying to do, Adam Peters and I. And I think the only thing that we sort of hit on was that we're going to try to make a record that didn't sound like a Lloyd Cole record, which is really not the smartest idea, because you can't, it's impossible to succeed anyway. So yeah, that's the only album that I'm really disappointed with, even though I would say there's some lovely tracks on it. But as a piece of work, I'd like to do that one over. And Love Story, which came after it, I know it's very popular with my people, but I do still feel that I wish I'd been a bit braver with that one. I wish I could have moved further away from rock pop with that record. The songs were strong enough that they could have had maybe a little bit more minimalist and maybe, more Tim Hardin, less Lovin' Spoonful. But the most exciting albums are almost always the ones that come at the beginning of periods, so that after periods of change. So the first record obviously was fantastically exciting to make, and we got lucky that we had a good year writing songs that year. And then my first solo record was, making the last Commotions record was very, very difficult. It was like pulling teeth. It was really hard. We wrote 10 songs over about a 15-month period, and it was very hard to write them. And then I moved to New York, and I wrote 25 songs in 8 weeks, something like that. No, it just, I was refreshed by change. And so the same thing happened when we moved up here to New England, and I moved my studio into an old mill building, and I made music in a foreign language. That's the same thing. And again, and all these 3 records were all records that I had a very distinct idea what I was wanting to do. And so, yeah, the starting over records are the most exciting, I think. And so I'd probably count Guesswork in with that as well, in that Guesswork was my first attempt after Bad Vibes to integrate synthetic sound into it with my songwriting in a not just a side role, an integral key role on the record. And it took me a long time to even pluck up the courage to try, because I knew I'd failed at it abysmally in the past. So I guess I'm fond of that record in the same way.
Oh, very good.
Well, yeah, I kind of had that as a question to ask you when you left the Commotions and moved to New York City. Did New York City play a contributing inspiration in your writing? And can you talk a little bit about some of you kind of worked with some guys there that you met, like for instance Matthew Sweet. I'm a big fan of Matthew Sweet. Can you just talk a little bit about that period?
Sure, it was fabulously exciting. I got there, I realized I could do what I was hoping I would be able to do. So I was full of optimism. I was living in a studio apartment in Soho. And every time I went out, I seemed like I met somebody new, somebody interesting. And in the first month I was there, I think I met Fred Maher's manager at a bar somewhere. And Fred was working on New York at the time, I think, with Lou Reed, or he'd just finished it. Fred had been in Scritti Politti, who I'd loved. And we met up, and we immediately kind of clicked, and we decided, well, maybe we can make a record together. Fred introduced me to Robert Quine and Matthew Sweet. And that was it. I said, well, we need somebody who can engineer. Why don't we bring in Paul Hardiman, who made Rattlesnakes? And Fred, Paul, and I made the 2 records in the 2 years or so. And it was just very exciting. It was a period where it felt like almost anything was possible. I mean, we ended up, the last things we recorded together, we went to Capitol Studios in LA and recorded a whole orchestra for side 1 of Don't Get Weird on Me Baby. It was side 2 over here. That seemed like brave and exciting, and yeah, like anything could happen. And Capitol Records at the time were still very much excited about the possibility of me as somebody who might actually sell some records. It didn't last much longer, but they were still excited at the time. So it was an exciting time, and I got married. So it was all good. There was hard to think of anything negative to say about that period.
Oh, so cool. All right, so we talked to many artists on this podcast that they have a vault of unreleased material. Some use everything. Some have a stockpile of songs that are locked up. What about you, the Lloyd Cole vault? Does that actually exist? Do you have a bunch of unreleased songs that are just waiting to be released at some time?
Oh, not that are finished and ready to release now. I mean, I've been going through the vaults for the Patreon page, and I have found a few outtakes that I'd forgotten about, a few outtakes that I'd remembered. But I would say, for the most part, 95% of what I'd recorded is out there. And there is, there's no Prince vault or and there's a few songs here and there, but for the most part, the good stuff that I've written it's nearly all released. And there's maybe 1 or 2 strong pieces that somehow or other fell between the cracks and between albums, which hopefully one day we can remedy that situation and get them released out there. I was just thinking the other day about stuff like this. The thing that, when we stopped making records and the idea of releasing singles with B-sides was over, it seemed somewhat sad at the time, but from a songwriting point of view, to put something on a B-side, to basically put out a piece of music that you've basically admitted isn't good enough to go on the album. Surely singles would have been better if they had nothing on the other side, or they were double A sides, with 2 great tracks on them. But the idea of just, you make an album and you record 15 tracks and 10 go on the album, the other 5 ended up being B-sides. Maybe it would have been better if they'd just all gone into the trash can. And so I was thinking about the new album now, because we've got a new single coming out. I don't need to give the record company a B-side.
Right.
That's a positive.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right. Well, we're almost out of our allotted time for the evening, or this morning, whatever you want to call it. But I have one more question for you. We asked this question to all of our guests, so this is going to be the toughest question of the night. Are you ready for this?
I'm definitely ready.
So, the mystery of rock and roll. It is no longer a thing with the dawning of the internet and all those different social medias that exist out there. But, if we didn't have the internet, we wouldn't be doing this with you tonight. But on the flip side, we lose the mystery and mystique of rock and roll. So for you, as the artist and the fan, what do you prefer, this new age of accessibility, or do you miss that mystique and mystery of rock and roll?
Well, I am a pragmatist, and in order to continue to make music and to make a living and to feed my family, I have had to adapt. So I'm not complaining about the lot that we're in right now. And I feel like I still have the mystery from my heroes because I was alive during that period. So I still have the memories, and I still have the mystery from my youth. So I'm not complaining. I do feel a little bit sorry for the current generation.
Fair enough. Well, we're out of our allotted time. Is there anything that we left off tonight that you would like to plug or promote?
No, I have no message, and if we didn't naturally start talking about it, we shouldn't start racking our brains wondering what it was.
Very good. So this is how things are going to work out. We're about 3.5 weeks behind on our episodes, but once Jeff, the editing wizard over here, gets everything cleaned up, we'll send this episode to your publicist. Sound good?
Sounds great.
Lloyd, thank you so much. It was an honor.
Yeah, thank you for coming on.
Oh, not at all. You're welcome. Thanks very much.
Hey.
I'll go and get dressed now.
All right. Have a good one, and good luck on your tour. Stay safe.
Thanks very much.
Yep.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
angels instead. Hide in the spotlights. Fight the grip of death. You can have the air you need, but you best not take one breath. Hey. Roll the dice. Take your chances. Everybody knows the game is fixed, there is no prize. Everybody pulls the plug and says their last goodbyes. Move to the sunshine, fight the grip of nights. If they ever take from you, then you plug out both their eyes. Hey. Roll the dice. Take your chances.
Welcome to the night. You think you know Night Demon? Then the Night Demon Heavy Metal Podcast is for you. Step into the darkness as we peel back the curtain to give you an unprecedented, all-access look into the mind and the heart of the demon. We're talking band history, song analysis, studio anecdotes, stories from the road. It's everything a diehard Night Demon fan could want and more. This is the only place to learn the inside scoop, the deep dive trivia, the untold tales from the band members themselves and those closest to the Night Demon story. Need more? The sacred Night Demon Crypt will be pried open to reveal demo recordings that have never before seen the light of day, all with in-depth commentary by the band and the people who were there for the writing and recording process. This is a gold mine, a treasure trove of all things Night Demon. Head over to nightdemon.net or wherever you listen to podcasts.